Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Community Team Live Q&A broadcast. I'm Balloons, and with me today is Michael Hall, and we'll be answering your questions live. Mike's back after some lovely rest and relaxation, and so I'm sure he's raring and ready to go and answer all of your wonderful questions. Mike also has a little bit to share about Ubuntu Online Summit, which is coming up next month. I think it's about 1 month and a few days away. And for those of you who have attended an online summit in the past, you'll know that it is a chance for all of us within the community to get together and talk and plan about the work that we want to do for the next cycle. So believe it or not, Utopic is getting very ready to release, which is always exciting. It's an exciting time for me being involved in quality. So we'll have another round of testing kicking off here very soon, looking at the final images. And so if you want to get involved in that, as always, you can contact me or check out the QA team. So Mike, why don't you talk a little bit more about Ubuntu Online Summit and some of the opportunities that are there and how people can get prepared for what's going on next month.
So the Ubuntu Online Summit is the evolution of the Ubuntu Developer Summit. For people who are new to Ubuntu, you might not be familiar with this, but every 6 months we would have an event where we would bring together everybody who's contributing to Ubuntu to plan the next release. In the past, those were in-person events. As our community and number of contributors grew, that kind of got out of hand, and we switched over to doing an online summit. So every 6 months we would get people together to talk about where they want to drive different parts of Ubuntu, the server, the desktop, what packages to include, the infrastructure that's used to build it and keep us in sync with Debian, all of that kind of thing. As well as community-oriented stuff like local teams, the way we have different councils broken up and how they support the rest of our community. With it being online now, everything's done through Google Hangouts, just like this one. In fact, it's very similar to the way we do these Q&As, where we'll have a YouTube broadcast video and an IRC channel associated with it. But we'll do more than one at once, and this is all managed on summit.ubuntu.com, where you'll see a list of sessions that are planned. We break them up into tracks, and they're all on the schedule saying when and what IRC channel they'll be. So we're just getting started on this. As Nick mentioned, it's a little over a month away. It's November 12th through the 14th, I believe. Right now, what we're doing is we're starting to gather session ideas. We usually recruit from within the engineering teams at Canonical the things that they know they need to talk about and plan out for the next release cycle. But we also open it up to anybody else who has a topic that they think needs to be discussed. So I've got instructions on the wiki. It's wiki.ubuntu.com/uds/create, which talks about how you can create a session. If there's going to be work items that come out of your session, I recommend that you use a blueprint, because that's what we use across the whole Ubuntu project to track work over the development cycle. If it's not going to have work items, if it's just going to be a conversation topic or a presentation topic, you can just propose those directly on summit.ubuntu.com. In either case, a track lead is going to approve it or reject it, depending on whether they think it's an appropriate topic for UDS or not. The tracks, they're not currently set up in summit.ubuntu.com. I'll get to that today, but they'll be the same as last time. So there'll be a cloud track, a desktop track, a community track, that kind of thing. And I'll be working on recruiting track leads on that. I'm going to ask everyone who was a track lead last time if they can do it again, but if anybody's interested in helping out with that, please let me know, and I will get you signed up as a track lead also. There's not a lot for track leads to do anymore. It used to be they were really, there was a lot of work for track leads the actual week of UDS. But we've started asking people who propose a session to run the Hangout themselves, which drastically reduces the amount of work that track leads need to do. So basically, if you're a track lead, your responsibilities are reviewing session proposals for your track and maintaining the schedule for your track. You'll get people who oftentimes have specific days or times that they need to run their session, and you just have to juggle things around to try and fit everyone in as best you can. But it's not that difficult anymore, and I try to have 3 or 4 track leads per track. So again, if you're interested in that, please let me know. Otherwise, if you've done it in the past, expect an email from me in the next couple of days. I think that's really all there is to say about it. Again, this is where we do all of our planning for the next cycle. So this is going to be planning Utopic +1, whatever the T release is going to be. And it can be technical, it can be community-oriented. When we switched from having it as just a developer summit to being an online summit, as we call it now, we have been trying to add a lot more user-focused content. So presentations on ways to use Ubuntu, software that's available in Ubuntu, or how to join different teams or sub-projects and contribute to that are open topics now. So if you have something there you want to present or talk about or give your story how you got involved, the Ubuntu Online Summit is available now for that. And that's all I have. If you have any questions on UDS or UOS, how it works, who can be involved and how, or what kind of topics we're looking for, start asking them in IRC, and I'll get to them before the end of the video. And again, that's coming up in November, the 12th through the 14th, so we don't have a lot of time, but there's enough time for you to think about what you want to talk about.
Right. So, Mike, I just mentioned, I added a link to the IRC discussion about proposing a session. So folks who are interested in proposing a session, if there's something that you want to talk about, proposing a session is a great way to do that. I know for those who may have been familiar in the past, typically that would involve creating a blueprint and planning out work and that sort of thing. But you can also just create a discussion or presentation session. So if you have a presentation that you want to share with a group of people, for instance, we had presentations on doing outreach work within the community or talks about what happened inside of a flavor in the last cycle, that sort of thing. Those are also welcome. You can also have a discussion, and none of those sessions would require a blueprint per se. You can actually just propose the session on the session page, and then the track lead for that track can review and accept or reject your session and work with you to make sure it gets scheduled. And so then, again, all you would really be required to do, other than coming up with the session and making sure you have a nice agenda and something to talk about, is actually starting the Hangout, and that's it. So it's really very easy now to get involved, even from the perspective of actually running and proposing a session. So don't be afraid of doing that, especially with the amount of time that we have. We're certainly here to help you. So.
And again, we do ask that if you're proposing a session that you are prepared to actually run it. If you can run the Hangout, that would be preferable. The track leads can do it for you if they really need to, but we try and avoid that just because it really makes that week difficult for track leads to try and manage everything. But they're available to help you if you have any technical problems or you need help setting it up and getting it into Summit. They're available for that. But don't propose things that you want other people to talk about. If you're not prepared to talk about it and drive the discussion or presentation, then please don't propose it. We have a lot of people with a lot of topics already. If you feel passionately about a topic or you really feel that something needs to be discussed, then all we ask is that you're the one running the session itself. And all of the videos that are used in summits are recorded on YouTube, so you can go back to previous online UDSs. They're all listed on summit.ubuntu.com. And you can browse their schedules and watch the videos for those sessions and read the IRC chat logs. So if you're curious, if you've never been to one of these and you want to see what it's like, you can go back to the previous UDS, which is in June, I think, and watch all of those videos and kind of see how it goes. We can have up to, I think, 10 people at a time on a Hangout, so we invite anybody who wants to be active in the discussions, if it's a discussion session, to join the Hangout. It's not just the person who created the session or who's running it that's in there. It's not a requirement. You can participate in IRC if you don't want to be on video or you can't be on video. I know a lot of people, they join in from work where they can't necessarily join a video or watch a video, but they can listen to the audio and talk in IRC, and that's fine too. We keep a close eye on the IRC channels for each of those sessions, just like we do in these community Q&As and the Ubuntu Engineering Live. So if you have questions or you want to just add something to the topic, you can do that in IRC if you can't join the Hangout itself. All right.
Indeed. Yeah, so anyway, feel free to ask any questions that you might have, whether it's about Ubuntu Online Summit or anything else within the Ubuntu world. Mike and I are here and happy to answer any questions that you might have. So let's see. I did mention that Utopic is coming to a close. I think we have, what, about 2 weeks left before the final images will occur.
Yeah, I think so. I think the 23rd is probably going to be release day. It's usually the Thursday of the second to last week of the month. So if we keep up with that tradition, it'll be the 23rd will be release day.
Indeed, it is the 23rd.
And we have an IRC channel for that day. I think it's #Ubuntu-release-party. If you want to join the celebration and watch the countdown for the actual official release, you can join that channel. Don't ask if it's out yet, because there's a bot that will playfully kick anybody who asks that question. But you can come in and you can watch people get kicked if they do.
Always a good time. But I was going to mention that, so looking at the calendar, obviously the 16th then would be the start of testing the final images. And so really, if you have time and the ability, starting from that Monday through the rest of the week, or any time between now and when the final images occur, grab a daily image and give it a whirl on your machine and see if it works out. There have been a few more installation bugs crop up this cycle than what we saw last cycle, so definitely would appreciate anyone's input into making sure all those bugs are squished and that we get a good image that works on your machine, in virtual machines, and wherever you might choose to run it. So.
Yeah, now is a good time if you want to contribute to testing Ubuntu, because it's stable enough that you can use it. There shouldn't be very many bugs, but there's still enough time that if you find one and report it, it can be fixed before the official release. So if you haven't done testing before, or you're a little bit concerned about putting the latest bleeding edge stuff on your laptop or desktop because you need it to do actual work, now's a good time to upgrade and still be able to contribute a little bit before the release.
Yeah, definitely. It's that time of cycle when hopefully all of the crazy bugs are solved, and that's pretty much true because the feature freeze has passed, and so changes aren't being uploaded willy-nilly. At this point, it's polish and bug fixes. So, all right, I think we have a few questions starting to roll in, so let's go ahead and tackle some of these. So Akiva is asking about the Ubuntu Touch on the Fowler devices, and he asks, will you be able to sudo apt-get to your heart's content on Ubuntu Touch, and what will be the limitations?
So by default, we're using what we're calling system image-based updates, where the entire install file system is delivered as a single image instead of being built up a package at a time. And updates come the same way. So you'll get a diff image of between what you installed and the newest version, and it'll just copy that over on the existing install. And in order to do that, we've had to make the default file system read-only. It makes it a lot easier and safer to upgrade, but it does mean that you can't do things one package at a time. So by default, it's read-only and you can't use apt-get. However, if you want to do that, it's easy enough to switch it over to where you're doing it by package instead of by image. it means you lose the benefit of the image-based updates. You can't just use that to upgrade quickly and easily anymore. You have to do it a package at a time. Otherwise, if you've installed or changed some packages from the default install and you try and apply one of those update images, it's likely to break things. So it's a balance between convenience and flexibility. By default, we favor the convenience method because we think that's what most people want on their phone, but it's easy enough for you to change back. If you want all the power of apt-get, you can get that. However, for apps, we have click packages now. So for any apps that you want to install, you will be able to just install those easily. You can browse the store with our Ubuntu store scope and install those. You don't need super user permissions to do that like you do for apt-get, and you don't need to worry about security. So when you're apt-getting stuff, everything in the archives is manually reviewed in terms of source code to ensure that it's safe, which is good for distro packages, but is not so good for third-party apps. What we found trying to support this for third-party apps is that it requires quite a bit of manual work for us to review those, and the review queue got quickly out of hand and still is out of hand for the desktop store. So we created these click packages so that we can run them safely without them being reviewed, and that lets app developers deliver the latest version of their software directly to you without waiting on us to review it or get it into Debian and have the next release sync with Debian to pull that in. So it makes it a lot faster and easier for you to get apps, and that's available whether you use system-based updates or not. But if all you're interested in using apt-get for is to install apps and get updates on them, then we provide that even with system-based updates. All right, next question, also from Akiva. Will the browser app eventually replace Firefox, or will Firefox stay on the desktop?
It's an interesting question, isn't it?
So going back to talking about UDS earlier, for as long as I can remember, every UDS, just about, whether in person or online, there's been a topic about the default browser. So this isn't a new question, it's just that the alternatives have changed. For a while it was, should we include Chromium as the default browser? Before Chromium it was, I don't remember the name now, Epiphany, that's what it was, the GNOME browser. So it's not a new question. We talk about the default browser fairly often. I'm sure it will come up again in this UDS and future UDSs. It is the default. The new one is the default browser on the phone, but I don't see it replacing Firefox on the desktop anytime real soon. But that might change with Unity 8 and with Mir. If Firefox is no longer an option for us, then we do know that this browser that we've created will work well with those. And there will be a lot of work to make it as powerful as Firefox and to add the features that Firefox has that we don't currently have. But that will be an option to us, and I think sometime in the next year or so that will become a more serious question. But I don't think anytime real soon we're going to be dropping Firefox.
And of course, it goes without saying, for those of you who've been through default application swaps in the past, they're always a hot topic. But whichever application sort of swaps with the other is always available in the repository. So, for instance, when Banshee and Rhythmbox played their dance between releases and swap back and forth, they were still both in the repository. In fact, I was running at the time. I think I was running Rhythmbox, and I never actually swapped to Banshee because, of course, I didn't do a fresh install when I was upgrading. So my user experience never even changed on that perspective. So Firefox would not go away on the desktop in either scenario, nor would Chromium or any of the other browsers that are currently available to you.
Right.
Important to keep that in mind. Akiva asks yet another question. He asks, have theming standards been put in place, or is this still something on the back burner? And I presume he's talking about on Ubuntu touch devices as well.
I know that there is theming support in our UI toolkit that's based off of Qt, and there's theming supporting Qt itself also. I know there were plans to make that work a little bit better and to make it easier to change out themes, either system-wide or per application. I don't know what the status of that is right now. I do know that what you currently see is provided by a theme, so it's technically possible to do already. It just may not be very easy. You can talk to the SDK developers about that. I think Florian, who's Calio on IRC, or maybe Benjamin, but I'm not sure. Calio would probably be a good one to go to if you have questions about theming. He's my usual go-to person for anything Qt and UI toolkit related, and if he can't answer, he'll point to who can.
Right, so it's obvious that the theming has changed if you've been watching and following the Ubuntu Touch devices. I know Popey showed us, we were looking at his screenshot collection one day, showing the core apps through time, if you will, as they evolved, and you can see the theming standards evolving with it. So, yeah, it's been interesting to watch the design evolution that's occurred. So, anyway, Akiva has another question. You're on fire. He says there are 2 desktop ISOs. Will those exist when 14.10 is released? And I assume, actually, well, I'm not sure what you're talking about. I assume maybe you're talking about the Unity 8 ISO and the normal desktop ISO. I'm not sure. Both of those will continue to exist if that is the question. I guess if you want to rephrase and ask again, if that doesn't answer your question, let us know.
If you are talking about the Unity Next ISO, which is the Unity 8 and Mirror testing ground, they will both exist for 14.10, just because we're not going to have Unity 8 and Mirror ready to use in 14.10 on the default ISO. Whether it will exist or not in 15.04 remains to be seen. It'll probably exist at least for a little while, even if it's not when 15.04 is finally released. I know a lot of the work on that ISO has been on the back-end integration, so making sure that we can start up Unity 8 and Mirror properly on a desktop, because it does behave a little bit differently than Unity 7 and Compiz and X11 behave. So if we get that all sorted out and it can live happily with Unity 7 and Compiz on the same ISO, then we may be able to drop the Unity Next builds. But until that happens, you can expect to have the 2 different ISOs.
Yeah, I agree. I expect it to stick around probably for all of 15.04, but that's just my opinion. And it's simply for the reason that it's easier to test, even if it's becomes a more integrated part of the desktop experience. So we'll see. I think next up is Happy Boy, and he asks about OEM partnerships. So he says, can we expect OEM partnerships like Cyanogen did with OnePlus?
So if you haven't heard, we already have 2 OEM partners. We have BQ, who's operating out of Spain. They're going to be coming out with a device running Ubuntu available in Europe. And we also have Meizu, who's in China, and will be coming out with a device also for that market. So we already have 2, and we're looking for more all the time. We will hopefully, once these 2 release their phones, we'll hopefully start having more come on board and provide more coverage in more countries so that you can buy a phone pre-installed with Ubuntu and supported with Ubuntu.
Yes, and so the next question by Akiva sort of falls into that. He asks about the MX4 with Ubuntu.
So a Meizu phone with Ubuntu is a sure thing. Exactly what hardware it's going to be released on, Meizu hasn't said yet. So it might be the MX4, it might be similar hardware called something else, it might be the same hardware called something else, I don't know. But a phone from Meizu is a sure thing. Whether or not it'll be the MX4, that's still a little bit up in the air.
Okay, so next we have Simone who asks, is there any plan or has there been any discussion regarding Java support for ARM/phone? So I'm assuming, again, he's talking about Ubuntu Touch and Java, which is an interesting topic.
Yeah. So Poppy already kind of answered in IRC that there's at least one app in the store that uses Java. The problem is that since Java is not part of the Ubuntu platform, if you have an app that uses it, you have to ship the JVM as part of your click package, which makes it quite a bit bigger than it otherwise would be. So it's perfectly possible. It probably is not good practice to do. It would be far better for you to port the app if that's something that you can do, rather than packaging up the whole JVM in your package. And porting is not very hard. I mean, I spent a few days and wrote a bit of Python that would convert quite a bit of an Android application over to a QML application. I think the hardest part of any app is going to be in figuring out the logic and the data structures and getting the assets that you need. Actually writing the code is probably 20% of the work. So if you already have a working Android app, you've already got 80% of what you need for a native Ubuntu port. And at that point, it's just worth it to do that 20% of work rather than try and ship Java all the time with your app.
Sure, but of course, there's nothing precluding you from doing it. But I assume that the Java support is maybe a reference to Android. Maybe that's what it is, unless he's wanting to run some sort of Java code. I don't know.
I would assume it's in reference to Java. We don't ship an Android compatible JVM. I'm not even sure if Alien Dalvik is in the archives, but we do have ARM builds of the OpenJDK version, so you can run full Java apps using that if you want. You do have to make them touch friendly though, so don't expect to be able to run something like Eclipse on your phone and have that in any way usable.
The screenshots that you could do for that, my goodness. All right, so Akiva asks, can you sell plugins for applications in the store? Not sure what he means by plugins for pre-existing applications. Do you?
Traditionally, with deb packages, you could submit a deb package that would provide an extension to, say, Rhythmbox, without it having to actually be a part of Rhythmbox. You can't currently do that with click packages right now because they do have to exist independently of each other. So you can't provide a plugin to somebody else's click package. You may be able to do it to your own package because there is some ability to share things, but I don't know how well that's supported. You will be able to, anyway, sell apps from the new store. That hasn't been, the switch hasn't been flipped to turn that on yet, but most of the code's already in place. I think they're just iterating over the UI and payment workflow on it right now to iron out some bumps in the road there. But most of that functionality is already there, and that'll be enabled soon so that you can sell apps at least through the store. But as far as plugins, not currently, no.
Okay.
All right, AJ, he didn't prefix this with a question, but he asked why Chrome is not the default. And the reason why Chrome isn't and cannot be the default is because Chrome is not fully open source. We cannot redistribute it as part of Ubuntu proper because of that. Chromium would be a choice because that is open source and we can redistribute it that way, but Chrome itself is not. And this comes up with several things. There's things like AppGrid, which is an alternative to the Ubuntu Software Center that a lot of people like. People have asked, can that be used as the default? But it's also not open source. so we can't distribute it the way we distribute the rest of Ubuntu, which makes it not an option for us. All right, and AJ asks again, iMessage-like application on Ubuntu. I'm assuming iMessage is the iPhone's messaging app. We have a messaging app for SMS right now. I don't know what specifically about iMessage you're looking to have in it. So if you can give a little more detail, I don't know. Nick, are you familiar with iMessage?
No, not really. I'm trying to think. Yeah, seeing it, I would agree. I'm assuming it's the default messaging app, so which is covered. If you're looking for a different type of messaging app on the platform, we could certainly talk about some of those. Obviously, messaging is an important part of the phone experience for lots of people. So if there's something specific that you're looking for, mention it. Some sort of specific functionality. Like Mike said, we can send SMS and MMS as it is now. So Akiva asks, I saw some QML in the SDK on the devices tab. Is there an eventual plan way down the road to have the whole SDK and presumably all other apps done in QML?
So the SDK is a mix of, we've provided a little bit of QML, but it's mostly Qt widgets. And QML is really just an easier way of developing Qt apps. So Qt widgets and QML naturally go together. We mix them up quite a bit, especially with some of our system apps, like the messaging app, the dialer, are a mix of both. So for the SDK, I would say what you see now is probably what's going to continue to exist. It's all essentially the same technology already. As far as other apps, we're developing all of our phone apps in Qt and QML or pure QML, depending on the app itself. And we would like to see more of that, especially using our Ubuntu UI toolkit, because it is designed to scale not only to different screen sizes and resolutions, but also to different form factors and uses. So for that reason alone, we would like to have more and more of our default apps using QML and our UI toolkit so that we can provide the convergence story that we're really pushing for. So that if you dock your phone or tablet to a large screen and keyboard, the apps that you use commonly will convert properly to that form factor and be usable in that form factor, which is something you get from our UI toolkit that you don't get easily from others. So for that reason alone, we'd like to see more apps done that way. It's not going to be a requirement. As Nick said, things like Firefox will always be in the store. If they use a toolkit that runs on Mir, they'll be able to run on Unity 8. If they don't, then they'll be able to run on Xmir using their X11 version. But of course, those won't work very well in a convergence environment, because if they're designed for desktop, they're not going to work very well in phone. All right, Happy Boy asks, is it true that Tesla runs modified version of Ubuntu? Nick, do you have a Tesla?
I wish I had a Tesla, and I've heard that as well, and so it apparently seemingly is true. As far as I can tell, but I don't have one, so I can't agree with that. Although I do like any device that runs Ubuntu, and the possibility to hack my car sounds very cool. So
yeah, I'm unfortunately in the same Tesla-less condition as you are. I think we've probably all read the same articles discussing Ubuntu on Tesla, and the fact that they use Firefox and HTML to present the display on their built-in infotainment system. So I think you've got the same information we do. It seems reliable enough. I don't know why anybody would make that up. So if I had to guess, I would say yes, Tesla runs a modified version of Ubuntu.
if anyone wants to fund, fund a Tesla, we'd be happy
Donate
to
to
confirm
the
that.
community team, we would be more than happy to properly verify that.
Yeah. Oh man, we would have to pass it around. That would be interesting.
Well,
You
we
share it
just
in your car.
we just put it wherever the highest concentration of community team members
Oh,
are,
there
which
you
I'm
go.
pretty sure is Florida. So
That's right.
that would work out, I think.
I agree.
I'm sure the others wouldn't mind at all.
Europeans, they don't need cars, right?
For those who don't know, both Nick and I are in Florida within just a couple hours of each other, and we're the only ones of the community team that are this close to each other.
Yes. So
Although
I have to
David,
poke the rest of them. That's
David's in
not meant
Germany
as a
now, so he and
criticism.
Daniel might have a case for having one over there.
Oh, that's true. We do have two in Germany. Hmm.
So if anyone wants to donate a Tesla, please donate 2 Teslas.
There you go. That would solve the problem.
I'm sure you've got extras. All
All
right,
right.
getting
What's
back
our
to
next
questions.
question? Yeah.
Akiva asks, have you worked with the engineers directly from Meizu and BQ yet? What has that been like? So I have not personally. Nick, I don't know if you have.
Not directly. Typically, our team, the community team, works with you guys instead of OEM engineers. But there are folks who are obviously working with them as part
Oh
of,
yeah,
as part of our partnerships to for those guys to develop and release phones. So
yeah. There are
as
a
far as
number
I
of
understand it, the experience has been good. So I've not heard any negative or jarring feedback or anything like that. So.
yeah, and I've been on the Meizu forums and interacted with some of the moderators on the forums there. I know, again, there's a lot of people in Canonical that interact with them on the technical and marketing side of things. That's just not the community team's focus. As Nick said, our focus is on you guys and making sure that Canonical engineers work well with you and vice versa. All right, Rody asks, looking at the additional drivers available for NVIDIA, I see that version 340.46 is open source. How come that such a driver cannot be made available when installing Ubuntu on system with an NVIDIA card? Is it open source? I know the Nouveau drivers are properly open source, but I didn't think that the official NVIDIA drivers were. They're available to install for free and maybe available to distribute for free. But I don't believe that they're open source. If that's changed, then that's pretty big news. If you've got a source for that, please post the link in IRC because I'd be very interested in hearing about that.
Right. I agree. As far as I know, they're not open source. That would be a huge deal if NVIDIA decided to open source their drivers. And certainly there'd be a lot of people interested if that was the case.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I specifically look for Intel GPUs is because Intel's graphics drivers are almost all open source, and they work well with upstream kernel developers to make sure that those are part of the mainline kernel and that everything works well. So I've always tried to stick with Intel because I know that's rock solid, and if NVIDIA starts doing the same thing, then that would be a huge win, both for them and for those of us who use Linux.
Right. I guess to answer the question maybe more generically, apart from the driver being open source or not, what you see in the additional drivers tab typically for releases are handpicked and attempted to be tested as well versions of the drivers. So sometimes you may not always have the exact really bleeding edge driver available to you. And if you need that for some reason, you're certainly welcome to go get it from NVIDIA directly and install it. So what's in the archives is generally something that is intended to be as stable as possible and reach as wide as possible user base to have a stable, useful driver available to you when you install Ubuntu out of the box, even if it is a proprietary driver. But of course, obviously we're not upstream of that, so we're not we don't provide the code directly, and it's just as much of a black box to us within Ubuntu as it is to you installing it on your machine. So, but that might be why, if you're wondering why the latest and greatest driver isn't available. That said, again, if there's a reason that you need that driver, if you need specific hardware support that requires that driver, that is obviously a great reason to get it into the repository. So you could consider filing a bug and letting the kernel and XOR team know that. So
we already posted a screenshot of the additional drivers window. So we'll have to look into that. That may just be a data bug.
Oh, it says it's open source. Is that what we're after? Look at that. Nice.
The others, they're proprietary. So that my initial reaction would be that that's probably just a bug in the data and that it's not actually open source. But I'll check into that, and if it is, that would be big news indeed. And if it is open source, then yeah, there's no reason we couldn't include it by default on the CD and as part of the default install.
Yeah, I suspect that's just a data bug. Although that would be really cool if it was. I think, let's see, the next question. So Akiva asks, does Canonical have any plans to enter hardware manufacturing at all beyond hiring out contractors?
So the short answer is no.
Right.
We're a software company. We don't plan on becoming a hardware company. We work with quite a few hardware partners across different industries. We've already discussed phone. We've got a number of partners who deliver laptops and desktop with Ubuntu, including the big manufacturers like Dell, HP, and Lenovo. And then, of course, we also work with server manufacturers to make sure that Ubuntu server runs on their hardware and is certified for their hardware. And now with OpenStack and cloud technology like Juju and Maz, we're working even more with server hardware vendors to certify our software on that and get it pre-installed on that. All right, Happy Boy asks, kind of ties in with what we just said. Can we expect laptops pre-installed with Ubuntu anytime soon? So as I said, we've got quite a few laptop OEMs already on board with Ubuntu in different markets. I know in India and China, Dell is selling it in brick-and-mortar stores. I think HP is selling Ubuntu laptops in Mexico's big box stores. It's harder to find in the US and some other Western European countries, but it is available in a lot of places, and a lot of them offer it online too. I know Dell has an on-again, off-again offer online to buy an Ubuntu a laptop with Ubuntu pre-installed on it. So there are some. We're growing it slowly, and again, we're growing it quite a bit more in South Asia and South America at the moment. But it is getting easier and easier to find a laptop with Ubuntu pre-installed. And then, as Akiva pointed out, we've got vendors like System76 and also Zareason, who are both big supporters of Ubuntu and have been for quite a while. And you can buy laptops from them exclusively with open source software on them. And they've got quite a few different models that you can choose from, some of which are very nice and very comparable to high-end laptops that you can get from other vendors.
So Akiva asks, is there an official hardware development platform for the tablet form factor yet?
Do you have yours?
Oh, we'll see. Sadly, I'm moving, so my desk is really bare. It should be right here, but it's not because it of course is packed. Yes. Well, anyway, the Nexus 10, if you may remember, was originally the sort of driver tablet form factor that we were driving towards, and we spent an entire cycle sort of really focusing on tablet. We've since, of course, spent even more effort looking at phones specifically this last cycle, but we still have tablets, and at the moment the Nexus 7 would be the go-to device, I would say, for tablets. So we had originally targeted the Nexus 7, the first edition, I guess you call it, the 2012 and the 2013. I think that's what differentiation they made. And Mike, I think you still have one of the old 2012 versions, right?
Yeah, and it never ran very well on that, and they fought the, I think the GPU specifically on that was a constant source of problems for them, which is part of the reason they chose to switch to the 2013 Nexus 7.
So I have used it on the 2013 Nexus 7, and it's quite nice, actually. I kind of personally prefer the 7-inch tablet as opposed to the 10, but I've gone back and forth. It's hard to say. Since phones are getting so big now, maybe you just want a big phone and then a larger tablet. It'll be interesting to see where those tablet sizes will shake out. But one thing with the 7 is it's kind of like a big phone because you sort of have that in-between display. It's a bit harder to do things like the side stage that we showed off in the Nexus 10, which is one of the biggest benefits to me of having the tablet. Being able to do the side stage, for those of you who don't know, is essentially having sort of multitasking. So you have a small window on the side where you have a phone-sized application, and then you have on the bulk of the display and another application running. So for instance, you could have a browser running and a calculator window running or a messaging app or something like that. And so you're sort of effectively multitasking on a larger screen. And so I was able to play with that for, I don't know, it's been a while ago now since I've played around on the Nexus 10, but it'd be definitely something to look forward to and to interact with more as we get more and more into tablets.
All right. Akiva is asking, is there any canonical applications or plumbing that is utilizing Go yet? Any plans to utilize Go more in the future, given that Mark is such a fan of it? So we are actually using quite a bit of Go already. I know recently, over the last year or so, Juju has been completely rewritten from being in Python to being in Go. So that's all Go now. Quite a number of scopes on the phone are now also written in Go. There's still a little bit of work that needs to be done to make that something we can support easily with third-party scope developers, which is why we're currently only publishing documentation for writing scopes in C++. But Chris Wayne, who's in our one of our engineering teams, has been writing Go scopes for a while now, including a lot of the defaultly installed ones. So that's there. That'll be getting more official support soon. There's Go bindings for QML, which will let you write apps in Go using the Ubuntu UI toolkit, which is also in the works. There have been some stumbling blocks along the way because Go is a new language and it's still adding a lot of features that you would expect a language to have. Things like being able to use shared libraries instead of statically compiling everything together or statically linking everything together. But it's getting there. I think you'll start seeing a lot more of that in the next 6 to 12 months as we work at the last of those hurdles.
Akiva asks, what do you think about Windows 10? Personally, when I was when the announcement was going on, I was laughing because I could remember there was an article, an April Fool's joke that basically I think it was InfoWorld who did it, and they put forward the supposition that Windows was skipping Windows 9 and going straight to Windows 10, and there was this big long-running gag about it. So when I first found out, that was the first thought in my mind, and I thought that was rather funny. As far as how the rest of the operating system looks or uses, I haven't really looked or paid much attention to it beyond that. I just thought it was quite humorous that they played it into their own April Fool's joke.
So Microsoft has been making a lot of announcements lately that should sound familiar to anybody who's been watching Ubuntu for a while. They announced that they were going to provide one programming platform for applications that will support multiple devices. They announced that they're going to have one operating system across all of those devices, and more importantly, that the interface is going to adapt to those form factors. All of which is something that we've been working on and talking about for years now in Ubuntu. So I think that Windows 8 is on the right track now. I think they've learned a lot of the mistakes from Windows 8 and are correcting those. As far as Convergence, I think they're going to be our primary competitor in the next couple of years because they do have the same goal as we do now, and they've learned their lessons and are now making some of the same design choices that we're making. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see who gets there first and who gets there best. Obviously, I'm very confident on our chances on that front. I know our engineers and our designers, they're all very talented. They've all been thinking about this for a very long time. And we do have a development lead on Microsoft currently. But of course, they're a huge, huge company with a lot of developers. So it's going to be interesting. But I think Windows 10 is going to be good for them. I really do.
Okay. Akiva asks, what file system is going to be used for flashing the phone?
I believe it uses ext4 currently. I don't think there's any plans to change that right now.
Right, I would agree. I don't think I would see us moving away from that. BTRFS on the phone would be.
There are certain benefits.
Yeah.
If this is a topic you're really interested in and want to talk about and discuss, again, the Ubuntu Online Summit in November is the perfect time for that. Any major changes like that to the phone or the desktop should be discussed in an Ubuntu Online Summit session.
Yeah, I could definitely see arguments being made for utilizing some of the advanced features of BTRFS to do some of the system updates, for instance, that we do. That could be interesting. I think, yeah, I certainly don't foresee us shipping that on a production phone anytime soon, but it would be an interesting experiment to play with and to see what you could rig up and make work, and who knows. Definitely very forward thinking. Happy Boy asks, Ubuntu Touch has very limited apps. Is there any plan to add support for Google Play Store services? I'll let you take that, Mike.
I'll tackle this in two parts. As far as adding support for Google Play Store services, the short answer is no. We don't plan on adding a compatibility layer for running Android apps directly on Ubuntu. I mentioned earlier that actually porting the code of an existing app is a minority part of the work. So we're making it as easy as we can to write apps for Ubuntu and to port apps to Ubuntu so that you can use the assets you already have and the logic and data structures you've already figured out to build a native Ubuntu app quickly and easily, instead of trying to support Google apps on Ubuntu. But going back to the first part, Ubuntu Touch does have a very limited number of apps right now. But when you consider the fact that there isn't actually an Ubuntu phone on the market yet, we actually have quite a number of apps for things that people are having to flash their own devices for. It's growing every month, every day even. We're getting new apps in there and new app developers in there. I figured for a presentation, I went and looked at the history of our app growth, and every 4 to 5 months, the number of apps in our store has doubled. And that's been going on for as far back as we've been tracking the number of apps in the store. And if we continue on that trajectory, the number of apps is going to grow quite a bit, especially after the phones are released and people are actually buying them in large numbers for personal use. You'll start to see even more apps coming. So I think our current limited number of apps is just a temporary phase that we're going to outgrow pretty soon. So I don't think there's any reason to try and support another platform's ecosystem on Ubuntu. I think that's going to be a losing battle. I think everybody who's tried to do that so far has had the same issues of trying to maintain compatibility and stability while doing that. I mean, we've had Wine available on Linux desktops for years now, and it's always playing catch up to Windows. It's always trying to support what people expect it to support. And I think that's not a really good way to base a platform's success on. It's a nice to have if you really need it, but we've shown on desktops already that having native apps specifically for that platform provide a much better user experience than trying to support another platform's apps. And we're just about out of time, so we may have to rush through these last questions. Akiva asks, what is the most interesting thing happening in plumbing? So, from my perspective, it's the things that we're adding for the phone. Things like app confinement, click packages, the content hub, all that kind of thing that lets us easily deliver apps and let apps interact on the phone in a way that's safe and secure for the user. It is the most interesting thing for me. I think that's going to open up a lot of new avenues for app developers to explore. That's going to lead to some very interesting things, both on the phone and on the desktop also.
Yeah, I agree. I think the security framework and what's being set up on the phone is probably the most interesting and one of the coolest parts about the phone, even though it's behind the scenes and in the background. Jackie P asks, can I use Ubuntu without using the command line? I think that's a pretty resounding yes.
Yes.
You could certainly do so, and that's sort of been the mission of Ubuntu for a long time, Ubuntu for human beings.
So you'll see, if you go looking for help on something, you'll see people posting command line things for you to copy and paste. And that's not because that's the only way to do it. There's almost always a graphical way to do it. But when you're helping somebody out, it's much easier to give them something they can copy-paste reliably than a large list of steps for them to perform to find the right option. So you'll see a lot of command line advice on the internet, but it's not necessary. Both of my kids have been using Ubuntu for as long as they've been using a computer, and they don't have to go to the command line for anything. I use it all the time just because I find it very fast and powerful, and it does the job well for me. But it's certainly optional.
Okay, and Akiva asks, is there any convergence working at this moment, such as a prototype dock phone to computer and have it scale up?
Not in terms of an actual phone dock. All the convergence work right now is going on in the Unity Next ISO and the work around that. So this involves both the underlying stack of Mir and getting it to work well as a desktop display server, as well as getting Unity 8 some desktop features. There's currently a few things that are different if you run Unity 8 from the Unity Next desktop ISO, as opposed to running it from the phone or the tablet. And there'll be more of that coming soon. That's been the primary focus of the convergence work right now. Once we've got that foundation done, then we'll be able to work on things like making sure that you can dock a phone to an HDMI output and it'll display the proper, I don't want to say desktop version because it won't necessarily always be the desktop version, but something that's appropriate for whatever you're plugged into.
Right. And I think the app story is on Convergence is much further along. It's quite possible to do have a converged code base within your app. And there's several good apps out there to see that in. I think I usually like to pick on Necklish's app, which I'm forgetting the name of, Flashback.
Yes, I like to bring that one up too because he did such a good job on that.
It's very visual, so you can really see the changes in a visual way. So I like to pick on that one.
Yeah. So if you go search for, I guess Ubuntu and Flashback or NIC90, NIK90, and Flashback on Google, you'll find a lot of stuff about that. He did a really good job on making it converge smoothly between desktop, tablet, and phone sizes, so that it looks nice for each one. It looks like it was designed specifically for each form factor, and he did it all in a single code base that'll adapt live as you're running it.
Right.
And I know a lot of the core apps also got a lot of Convergence style work to make them more usable on the desktop. So they got things like keyboard shortcuts and keyboard navigation built into them, which is available for you if you're plugged into something with a keyboard, but they're still usable if you only have a touch screen as input. All right, 2 more questions. Let's get through them. Akiva asks, what was a click package needed in the first place? What was wrong with Debian packages? So I mentioned earlier that Debian packages have to be manually reviewed. The main problems are Debian packages install as root, and they can do anything that they want at install time. So somebody could easily do something horribly malicious, install a rootkit, anything like that, when you're installing any kind of Debian package. The second problem is that they were designed to work together as part of a whole distro, which means that one Debian package can step on the toes of another. Those were the 2 main deficiencies with Deb packages specifically. There's also some problems with X11 that allows one app to see both the screen and inputs for another app, which is a big security problem. All of that made using desktop-style packages for a phone a nightmare. It made it a nightmare on the desktop too. I mentioned we've got a desktop app queue that's weeks or sometimes even months behind in getting reviews and feedback to developers because of that. Click packages do away with all that. Click packages don't need human review at all. I think the store now will automatically review your app and can automatically publish it. Popey said something about that, I think, last week. And we can do that with click packages because we know that they're safe to install all the time. They're safe to run all the time. And that's something that we tried to figure out how to do with Debian packages, and we just simply couldn't. All right, Happy Boy has 2 questions, which are kind of the same. Will root access on Ubuntu Touch void the warranty, and how easy is it to gain root access on Ubuntu Touch? I'll tackle the second one first. Right now, you can use sudo on the phone, and you use either your password or your PIN that you've set up, and you'll get sudo access right away from that. So it's as easy to get root access on Ubuntu Touch now as it is to get root access on Ubuntu Desktop now. As far as warranty goes, that's going to, in a large part, be up to the manufacturer of the phone. There's nothing that we're doing that's going to make it any different than it is on the desktop, though. And OEMs already provide the same access to root on the desktop as they do, or as we do in the default image. So I would expect it to be the same case on phones. But again, the warranty comes from the OEM. They have the final say in this. All right.
Okay.
That's all our questions. We're about 5-6 minutes over. So I think we should call it a wrap.
Yeah, I think so. Mike, thanks for being here. To everyone else, thank you as well. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. And thank you for all of your questions, as usual. Always interesting questions. Always great to hear from you guys. And tune in next week, same time, same place. We'll be here, as usual, answering your questions. And don't forget about both the Utopic release later on this month and Ubuntu Online Summit, which is coming up, again, in about 1 month from today. Start thinking about sessions and getting prepared to attend and talk and discuss about what's going to happen next cycle. So thanks again, everyone. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.